in the three-zone approach, it may be most appropriate for your organization to follow this model. If, for example, your work efforts or project-based work where you have work in progress cycle, it may last maybe 1 or 2 years and probably has definitive stop and start dates. With this model, the three-zone model approach, you probably have more complex records management needs, meaning that you're dealing with more than just a few classification and retention schedules. And also, this is a good model when project relevant. Email needs to be more globally and company visible. So as it's classified as records, or classified as business relevant content, it's easily used by other members of the organization. So the simplified model approach, it may be more appropriate when the classification needs are just simply more basic. Perhaps your organization is needing to deal with fewer classifications, maybe around 4 or 6 classifications. And perhaps also if your work cycles are shorter, projects don't last quite as long and maybe no more than a few months. And you'll know this, of course, just because email and other communications are not occurring after this period, and the work duration is just shorter. This model may also apply if your organization is just smaller, or if for some reason your transitory email items are naturally just lower in quantity. So to explain a little bit more and show a nice graphic here of the three-zone approach, I think this will go a long way to kind of visualizing both the three-zone and the simplified model. So zone 1 is what we're calling your transitory content, and these items really have little to no value for any real length of time. And disposing of this content in a timely manner is good in part because of the larger quantity. This will mitigate some of the risk if we go back to some of the safe harbor that we talked about with Darren. And it also will just make discovery efforts more efficient. You can see here in the graphic that most of our email systems, the transitory content is 80% of what we've got. A lot of this is, hey, would you like to go to lunch, and really throwaway messages that are not of any real value. So the value, business value emails is where what we're calling zone 2. This is our business-related relevant content, and the retention here is longer than transitory, of course, because it's our actual items of work. The retention rules here are simpler than, say, a classified record, because they're not what we would call business-critical records, and the retention period here would likely have some relationship with how long a typical work cycle for your organization lasts. So you wouldn't necessarily try to match if your projects or your work cycles typically last about a year. You wouldn't necessarily make your business value zone 2 content a year. You would maybe make it some multiplier of that to ensure that you've kept business value content for the appropriate amount of time. So figuring out what that retention schedule for the business value zone 2 content is important because the corporate records will have a more complex retention schedule, and you do want to guard against people moving zone 2 business value items into their zone 3 corporate records simply because they don't feel like they can tolerate them being deleted either from transitory or business value. So something that you want to guard against, both with just policy and practice, education, and then also having the appropriate schedules for retention in your zone 1 and 2. So in zone 3, these are your corporate records, and the quantity of items here may actually be fewer, but the classification or retention rules are more complex, and the information, of course, is the most essential information that we're trying to retain in this diagram. We're in this zone 3, we're complying with legal regulations and such. So, and you note here that in the zone 1, you can have this managed in your ECM repository. So, for example, in an open text content server, or these items could also be dispositioned just directly off of your mail server. Again, like I mentioned before, you want to make sure that your Zone 2 has sufficient capacity, space for users who are saving their business relevant content. We'll move on to the next slide. We'll discuss the primary actions that you would be taking in the three-zone approach. So because we understand the zones and what their intended purpose are, we can see that the things that you'll probably be doing as you're using this approach is classified items as work in progress, meaning these are email that you're logically moving to Zone 2. The storage would likely move from your mail server to the ECM storage backend, but the convenient thing about the OpenText solution, of course, is that the stub is left in the email client. So the same way you would have accessed the email before you classified it, you're now still accessing it there from your favorite Outlook client, or you can also access it through your ECM repository. The same is true for classifying a record. If your email is moving from Zone 1 or Zone 2 to Zone 3, you can have a stub in your email client. You can access that email from Outlook the way you normally would, or you can access it from your ECM repository. So you can also actively delete and move items to your deleted items bin, and probably this has a short retention period. Or the nice thing too about this zone approach is that inaction, where email just remains on your email client for because you've decided to do nothing with it. Inaction will cause the item to be deleted.